Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AIScento Podcast, where we explore the artificial intelligence and emerging technologies are transforming business, leadership, and society. I'm your host, John Okoro, founder of AIScento. Today, I'm excited to join by Sarah Marshall, founder and CEO of Operations Architect. Sarah helps organizations to bridge the gap between strategy and execution by designing high-performance operating models that enable businesses to scale, innovate, and thrive through disruption. Prior to founding or operations architect, she held executive leadership roles at Google and Logitech, leading large-scale transformation initiatives in complex global organizations. Sarah, welcome to the AIScento Podcast.
Pleasure to be here, John. Thanks for having me in.
Great, thanks for being here. Let's jump first into your journey from big tech transformation to leadership. So, Sarah, you've had leadership roles at companies like Google and Logitech before, launching Operations Architect. What inspired you to make the leap into entrepreneurship?
Um, well, at the beginning of 2024, I and thousands of my friends left Google, and it has been the course of things in the large enterprise companies. I think at that point, I recognized that I was ready to move away from enterprise work and big complex organizations and find a way to support and contribute to smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations. And so first, I wanted to have some experience in that and ran a cybersecurity stealth startup for a year and a half. And then that needed to be shut down, and I shut it down and pivoted over to a consultancy where I could put these ideas and concepts and practices that I've been developing over decades to use.
And looking back across your career, what were some of the recurring challenges that you saw organizations struggling with, regardless of size or industry?
So there's two things that I've seen organizations struggle with over the years. One is transformation. Generally, transformation is difficult. It's often fails, doesn't achieve the results that folks want, and it is very painful for organizations to go through. And it's it's a common theme because every organization goes through change, every organization needs to transform, and it's only getting more so over time. So transformation is one in an area where I've really spent a lot of time tackling how to be successful at it. The other is leadership. What is effective leadership in any organization? There's lots of theory, there's lots of methodologies out there for leadership, but in practical terms, what does it take to be a leader of leaders in an organization and successfully navigate through the very difficult times that we are living in?
And how did those experiences shape the philosophy and approach behind Operations Architect?
Well, they are everything to operations architect, so to speak. I'm operating on a thesis, and the thesis is that disruption, which was once episodic, it certainly when I started in industry, is now continuous. Most organizations are experiencing 3 to 5 major disruptions a year, and that's only increasing. So, how do we treat disruption and the transformation that we have to go through as a Tuesday? How do we treat it as a way of doing business rather than a heroic effort? That's one of the big ones. The second is that ability to navigate disruption as a Tuesday requires a different kind of a leadership than we practice historically. It requires leader as an architect rather as the superhero. And so both go hand in hand in terms of how I've formed my framework for what I deliver into companies through Operations Architect.
Okay, so one thing that strikes me is that many of the challenges you described existed before AI arrived, but AI seems to be accelerating both the opportunities and the risks. So let's talk about what organizations need to do differently in the era of AI. Many leaders now view AI as primarily a technology initiative. Why do you believe AI is fundamentally an operating model and leadership challenge?
Well, in order to contextualize that, AI is the superstar of innovation and disruption right now, right? But it's sitting there in a pantheon of many new technologies, emerging technologies that we're dealing with. Cloud technology, edge compute, 5G networking, blockchain, robotic automation, and there are more there, but there's a whole pantheon of technologies out there that could be potentially used to solve our business problems and are also causing disruption. But let's talk about AI because it is most certainly the superstar out there. Of the technologies I've described so far, most of those are they've hit the blue collar workforce harder than anyone else. Certainly, white collar workers are getting hit as well, but not nearly as badly as blue collar workers. AI and large language models specifically are just hitting the heart of white collar workers. So what seemed like something that those of us that have worked in the white collar world could navigate and figure ways around before, that's no longer an option. We have to meet it face on. So that's number one. Number two, as you've experienced, and I've certainly experienced, maturing technologies, we're still in early days with large language models. We're still figuring them out. They're probability-based technology, so they're not going to give precise answers unless we put guardrails on them. So learning how to engage the technology is critical. The third thing that I think is really important, and this is what I'm seeing as I'm talking to people that are in the large enterprises now, especially in Silicon Valley, is the entire valley is reorganizing itself, not to just have experts that do expert things and expert functions, but they have to become builders as well, using AI technology, building agentic AI to support their capabilities. So I can no longer, say, be head of strategy and ops as I once was at Google. I have to also be a builder that builds out agents to perform the work, or agent swarms to perform the work that I need to do. So the requirements for me as a technical worker have increased substantially over especially the last year. Now that's super impacting Silicon Valley companies, not so much Midwestern, hard good sellers, et cetera, right now. But that's going to change over the next couple of years.
And what are the biggest mistakes that organizations make when they're introducing AI into their operations?
Yeah, the number one thing that I'm seeing is the wonder of AI and what it could possibly do against what are the real business problems they're trying to solve. So there is a real lack of assessing a business problem, looking at alternatives to solving that problem, and then choosing AI as the best solution, as opposed to let's throw AI at it and see what it does.
And what separates the organizations that successfully scale AI from those that remain stuck in pilot projects and experimentation?
It goes back to what I just said. They have specific problems they're solving. They have AI competent, large language model competent folks, both on the technology side, because it has to live in a stack, et cetera, and on the business side, because we have to become more technically competent to use it. For example, just in my own personal use, I don't use AI like I would a search prompt. Search prompt, I put in a word and I get whatever I get out of it, and then I choose what I want. When I'm doing a large language model prompt, I actually build a whole set of requirements around what I'm looking for so that the responses have guardrails on them, and the whatever technology I'm using is self-checking to make sure that the references are right, et cetera, et cetera. I use a very different practice for engaging the models than I do just a regular search.
Right. And how should leaders evaluate whether a new AI tool deserves investment versus simply just being the latest trend?
Well, so start with the business problem, look at all options, determine which of those options might be the best option for you, and understand. I think a lot of people thought especially early on, that large language models would be a workforce solution. In other words, let me get rid of 20% of my workforce and I'll just plug in AI to do the work. There's two problems with that. One is you need expertise to ensure that the AI is operating in the way you want to. It's not just a matter of putting in a prompt and having it do its work and hoping for the right outcome. You have to have an expert looking at that outcome and saying, yeah, that's the right thing, or no, that's off. We need to adjust. We need to retrain, et cetera, et cetera. The other piece of that is that AI is very costly right now. I use a figure that I researched when I was at Google. It's public domain information, so I don't have a problem sharing it. The energy, the power, the effort to get an AI response is 16 times higher than getting a search response. That's a lot of energy. And when you put it in practice, what companies are seeing right now is very high costs for the output from AI. Now, as I mentioned before, we are in early days with AI. I expect that cost model will be adjusted over time and improve. But right now, throwing AI at a problem, one is it may not solve your problem, and two is it certainly may not lower your costs. You may be replacing costs with cost. Again, I think that'll change over time, but that's where we are today.
And professional services firms, there's consultants, accountants, attorneys, advisors. What are the first operational questions they should answer before deploying AI solutions?
The big one is, and this is, you brought up some good ones, because we've seen some examples of, say, young lawyers using AI to build their cases and just putting together rotten documents. So the number one thing is you have to be assured that you can get a good response out of the system that will actually meet your needs, and B, have somebody to confirm it. One of the big things that I'm seeing right now is there's this huge gap between those that can effectively navigate large language models and those that have true business or functional expertise like lawyers. And we haven't, I know that the large enterprises in Silicon Valley are doing a lot to resolve this, but for most of us out here, we have these young folks that are very competent in the technology, and these older folks that are experts in their arena, but not so competent in their technology. There's some of us in the gray area that sit in between it, but that gap hasn't been closed yet. So until we close that gap, we need to make sure that the folks that are highly technically competent and the folks that are highly functionally competent are married at the hip to ensure that the solutions are delivering what we need.
Now, you mentioned earlier that, obviously the white collar, jobs are really being impacted by AI, which is absolutely true. Do you think that, a lot of people are saying, hey, if you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you're whatever, construction, you're safe. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that robotics and things, we're going to actually see that change relatively quickly as well?
Yeah, I don't think any place is safe. If you're a plumber, there's always going to be a need for a plumber, right? But there's also an industry need for the work that we do as well. So I don't know that there is a safe place to be. I know some people will work in government and think that's a safe place. I think we've proven the case over the last couple of years that it's not such a safe place to be as well. So I don't know that there is a safe place. There is a personal strategy we can develop in this case. So I'm clearly deep in technology and deep in business operations capability. So I'm going to stake my claim there, and I'm going to marry as much as I can the technology to the expert work that I do.
Okay. Let's talk about AI leadership and the future of work now. So AI is accelerating change faster than most organizations have experienced before, much faster. How do you see leadership evolving over the next decade as AI becomes increasingly integrated into business operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think it is a key question that we're going to battle with over the next decade. I think that this is true of any leader in a transformation arena, and especially as transformation opportunities present themselves more frequently now, is leaders have historically been the superheroes that are the glue between strategy and execution. When things go south, when we have a disruption that requires attention, they are the superheroes that come in and solve the problems. And so we only solve our problems to the degree and of the expertise of that leader and in their capabilities. So leaders are expected to run their functions, whether it's revenue capture, product development, finance, you name the thing, and be an expert in being the glue of tying business operations together, strategy to execution, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a broken model. I've thought it for a long time, but it's becoming more and more apparent that we can't depend on superheroes that are both functional experts and cross operations experts as well. We need to be able to build in capabilities that are more infrastructure oriented than they are people oriented. And I don't mean that we're going to place leaders with some infrastructure changes. I mean that leaders become the architect of the infrastructure, the light infrastructure that we use in order to run our businesses. So that means leaders are learning to delegate more effectively when they're leaders of leaders, so that the folks that work with them can take the load, and that they are building their leadership capability into infrastructure via culture. So building transparency, accountability, collaboration, curiosity into the governance mix is a really critical piece. But that requires a different version of leadership than we are currently experiencing.
And as AI automates more routine work, what human skills become even more valuable?
Analytical skills are priceless right now, especially systemic thinking. So the more that you can analyze a problem and understand the impact systemically of the issues that you identify, the better you are. Because I'm talking about leader as architect, business operations as built into governance infrastructure, being able to analyze problems and then see the whole picture for how it's impacting the organization is critical.
Are we moving towards smaller AI augmented organizations with leaner teams and greater productivity?
I think so. I mean, that's where my bet is, because I'm seeing the value of the changes that are coming as lowering the barriers to competitive entry. So you don't need to be a large organization. Well, I'll just use a completely different example of what I'm talking about. So we're seeing Ukraine shift the tide of war by using a completely different way to take on combat than we've ever seen before through drone technology, et cetera. Similarly, we're not at war, but we're in technology. Technology is enabling smaller organizations to be able to do things much more quickly and much more cost effectively than we ever have seen before. So as I'm working with startup organizations and small businesses, I'm seeing swarms of folks moving into new areas and tackling what they didn't think was assailable before. And I'll give a good example from my own experience. Search was a juggernaut held by Google for 20 years. And it's still their juggernaut. But this emerging large language model technology is taking away that advantage rapidly, and small companies using it effectively can circumvent that juggernaut very easily. So we're seeing those changes happen. And you and I, over the courses of our careers, have seen new technologies give advantage to different kinds of organizations before. But never before have I seen barriers to entry drop so quickly and so radically than I'm seeing right now.
And what concerns you most about how businesses are approaching AI today?
Well, I still think so. It's kind of shifting right now, but the way business leaders have been treating it as the shiny object and they've been trying to plug it into everything. I know it's Steve Benioff made a mandate for the entire Salesforce organization to put AI in everything. And I don't think that's a wise or cost-effective application of AI. And what's happened is the promise of AI has not been met repeatedly over the last couple of years. I think we need to treat it like any other technology that's developed in the last 30 years, in that we have to use it to its limitations right now and then work with it as the technology matures, because it certainly is. When I started a couple of years ago using AI, I was trying different things and getting really crappy results. There's a lot better boundaries on AI response or prompt responses right now, so you can much more effectively manage it. But I don't know if you've noticed this. When I use AI, I can get it to work well for a period of time, and then it starts to go off center, and I have to refresh it with, here are the rules, here are the et cetera, et cetera. I think we will eventually get to a point where you have refresh mechanisms that make it effective every time, but we're not there yet, and we need to acknowledge that as we're making technology choices for our organizations.
I think there are quite a few people who have observed that there's kind of sometimes a spiral downward in quality of answers, which you describe. And often it seems to be because the AI or LLM will generate answers, often, like you said, nonsense answers, like the legal example you gave. And then later on, that or another LLM will actually look at the previous answers and quote those as truth. So now the quality keeps going down because it keeps quoting things that were actually made up, right? And then quoting them as fact. So I'm hoping there's a way to fix that, because obviously AI is becoming more and more prevalent in making decisions, right? But that seems to be a pattern a lot of people are identifying, is that quality starts to spiral down because it's, building on a foundation that's actually not factual.
I think where we're seeing the most effective application of AI to that point is in applications where the technologists that are building them have built in self-reference guidance into the responses. So that, and I know when I'm asking for references that I'm looking, build me this document that says this thing, use these references that you've scraped and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to go back after I see that and say, now go back to your references and make sure that everything that you've said in here is either directly quoted or inferred by the body of text that you're seeing. And then I would have it give me a quality check. Now I'm doing that on my own, but we need to build that into our technology systems.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense. I think that's going to be essential in the years coming, because it can't keep on doing that, kind of that we're not checking it, we're just going out and we see it out there and now we're going to quote it to you. That we got to fix that for sure.
Yeah, I'm constantly going back and saying, is that a verbatim comment? Is that an inferred comment? Or are you speculating? And I love the answers for that, because then it'll be honest. Well, I speculated on this one. Or
yeah. Looking ahead 5 years, what do you think are the highest performing organizations will be doing differently from today's average company?
I think it's largely going to, the applications I see that will make the most difference and probably make the most money are ones that are forecasting, with really effective forecasts. So I'm playing with this concept of forecasting disruption. So if you're looking at your external vectors, the economy, competition, marketplace trends, et cetera, where are the disruptions going to come from for my company, and what form will they come in, and what do I need to consider in my strategy to abate those disruptions? So that's one form of forecasting that I see as being very useful. I see it as going to be very powerful for demand supply forecasting for companies that have extensive complex supply chains. And anywhere where you're forecasting, drug forecasting. So if you have a biotech startup that's looking to develop some sort of drug, you want to be able to do forecasting based on whatever DNA or protein analysis that you can get and make some assumptions that will forecast what kind of drugs you'll be able to make in a more custom fashion. So I see forecasting as just a huge potential upside for AI at this point.
You clearly spend a lot of time thinking about how organizations evolve through disruption. I'd love to connect some of these future trends back to the frameworks you develop and how leaders can put these ideas into practice. So you developed several frameworks, including value delivery spine, clarity map, lead shift, flow guard. Which frameworks tend to resonate most strongly with clients when they first engage with operations architect?
Yeah, I usually don't introduce clients to those frameworks because they all have specific applications. I try to make this a very simple concept. There's two things that I'm trying to accomplish with all the work that I'm doing. One is to close the distance between strategy and execution so that as things change on either side, that the signals are immediately transmitted and action takes place very quickly. So if your strategy and your execution are married together, they look like the same thing. Now, they're developed very differently by very different kinds of people and with very different focuses. But if you can tie those together, you are going to reduce your wastage towards your strategy. You'll increase your value towards your strategy. The second thing that I am attempting to do with any of the things that I'm putting together is reduce recovery from disruption. So what I mean by that is speed up the process of deciding, planning, and executing on whatever that disruption implies, and reducing the heroic effort outside of the norm. So if you can build disruption management into your everyday practices, then you're not going to be expending heroic effort outside of them. You're not going to be burning people out. You're not going to be overspending to solve the problem. So trying to get disruption down to an incremental process that closes the distance between strategy and execution and reduces the recovery to normal.
Can you explain the value delivery spine and how it helps organizations to connect strategic goals to measurable business outcomes?
Yeah, sure. So the value delivery spine is the first framework that I developed, and it's based on my experience doing transformation in organizations. It starts with strategy and ends with new state performance, operational performance, and it has 6 stages. There's 3 strategic stages and 3 execution stages. The strategic pieces include building an actionable strategy based on the input you get from the headwinds. So you take in all the knowledge you have, you make clear decisions on your strategy, and then you deliver a set of measurable objectives that you're trying to achieve. If you're a startup, that's probably going to be a quarter at max. If you're a large enterprise, that could be up to 2 to 3 years that you're trying to achieve those objectives. Then you need to translate that into actionable capability. So you take those long-term objectives and you create commitments that you're going to do today. So the things I'm working on today to achieve those objectives are the fixed commitments that I'm making in this quarter or this year. Then you identify solutions that you're going to build to meet those commitments. And those we were talking earlier about AI, and I said, "What's your business problem?" and identify all the options for fixing that problem. AI might be one of them. Well, you want to do that with everything you're doing. You have a commitment you're trying to achieve. What are the options for doing that? The goods, the bads, etc. And then you go after it. Once you're on top of that, then you go into standard project management. So you have a portfolio of projects or programs you're working on, and you manage those against those current state commitments, which are tied to those long-term objectives. Build them out, do the work to deliver them, and then once they're delivered, you have new state performance that you measure. And you keep that loop going, and you keep the executive teams refreshed in terms of the knowledge they need to have on internal performance and external factors so that their decision-making capability is built on a foundation of knowledge that's always fresh.
Yeah. FlowGuard focuses on evaluating emerging technologies. How can organizations create a disciplined approach to evaluating AI opportunities without chasing every new trend?
Yeah, I've hinted at this earlier. I see technology considerations having a strategic aspect and a tactical aspect. The strategic aspect is having enough capability in your organization, and you may be contracting external folks, it's experts, et cetera, but having enough technology understanding that you can vet the major technologies that are emerging out there and make some calls about whether you think you might need to invest in that technology for sure. Maybe you need to test that technology to see if it has application, or it's just not for you. So you have those three strategic potentials. Then you build a funnel in to your organization, building some internal expertise to test out those technologies, see where they work best and where they don't work best, using small prototypes. I'm very much about not spending a huge amount of money on this stuff unless you believe it's actually going to do something for you. Once you have that pipeline in place, you now have a clear picture of what possible technical options you have. And then you switch over to the tactical side, which is, I have this business problem. I have these options for solving this business problem. Each of these options may use one or more set of new technologies. And here's what we've proven. Here's what we're not sure about. Here are some downsides to this technology. But in the long run, the total cost of using this technology will be more valuable than another option. So you kind of take it through the whole paces of, do we even bother with this technology, to here's what we can deploy, and this is the difference it's going to make.
Can you share an example where improving organizational alignment significantly accelerated technology adoption or transformation success?
Well, that's not true. Okay. What you're describing to me is not a technology issue. By and large, what I've found is transformation does not fail due to the technology. You can usually figure out how to get the technology to perform well enough. If you've chosen your technology well, you can figure out how to get it to perform well enough to deploy it. That's almost never the problem. The problem usually comes on the human side. So there's two things that I see that make that new technology consumption and adoption more likely than not, that you'll be successful in your transformation versus fail at it. One is that you have built an adaptive culture. And what I mean by an adaptive culture is that the people in your organization will jump on changes, will jump on the new thing that's coming, because one, they are expecting change to always happen. Change never stops. We will always be doing something different tomorrow than we were doing yesterday. So that means that the organization is transparent. Well, let's undergird that. The organization feels safe. They feel experimental. They feel like they can be open because it's safe to do so. And if the organization feels safe, it will be transparent about the problems it's having, communicating those to leadership for decision-making, et cetera. That there's clear ownership of all things. So leader has delegated to their leaders, and those leaders have delegated to their individual contributors, et cetera, that everybody's really clear about what they own. That there is curiosity, that people are curious about, if there's a failure, what can we learn from that failure rather than who can we blame? So what is that engagement that you're driving to in your governance that ensures that you're finding everything that you can learn out of a problem, and that there's very clear collaborative requirements, because none of us will win or lose on our own. We require other people to do that. So if you build that adaptive culture, and then the leader treats the change with transparency as well. We need to make this change. This is why we're doing it. This is where we're headed. you are far more likely to be successful in your transformation. And we discussed when we talked last an example of that happening. I'm happy to share it again at Google. Would you like me to share that? Okay.
Go ahead.
So when I was at Google, I built out the strategy and ops function. We did it very quickly because the culture within search was highly adaptive. Once they believed in something, they would jump on it, build it, mature it, make it work. And they were very good at that. So we built out the capability to define strategy, plug strategy in, go execute on it, get the work done. And we had a great process. At the end of 2022, we delivered a strategy for the first time ever on time, so that the organization could hammer it out and go tackle it for the year. 2 weeks later, ChatGPT hit 100 million users and became an existential threat, tossing out my beautifully 6-month developed strategy, so I had to rebuild it. We rebuilt that strategy in 6 weeks using the same disciplines and practices that we did building the strategy in the long term, and then planted it in place within 6 weeks. 8 weeks later, we had the large language model deployed in our tech stack. So it was a 14-week turnaround on the largest existential threat that Google had ever experienced. And the reason we were able to do that is because we had that highly adaptive culture. We had leaders that were quite open to change. There was a lot of humility in the room when they were assessing the issues and determining how they were going to work together to solve it. And it went like a hot knife through butter. It just went very well. It will be, for the rest of my life, it will be the example I will turn to say, this is how you deal with disruption.
That's a great bridge from theory and a real-world application. Let's spend a few minutes talking about what you're seeing directly in the market and the challenges that leaders are bringing to you today. You work with organizations at various stages of growth. Who typically reaches out first when transformation initiatives begin? Is it usually CEO, COO, founder, broader leadership team?
Yeah, it's typically either the COO or the CEO will grab me and talk to me and then shunt me to their operations folks immediately. So it'll be somebody that understands the power of operations and wants their operations to operate at peak performance.
Okay. What operational strategic pain points are clients bringing to you most frequently today?
So it's always a performance problem. It's generally something is on fire. I would love to have leaders that are either saying, "Hey, I want my system to perform better," or my whole company system to perform better, or I'm thinking 5 to 10 years in advance, and I would like you to come in and ready us for the stuff that's coming. The people that actually really come to me usually have some fire burning, and then I come in to help solve that problem, which opens up the door for other problems that we're seeing. For example, I'll give you an example of one organization I came into. Their problem was the nonprofit, and executive director tapped me to come in and solve their change management problem. Well, their change management problem had a program management problem attached to it, and that's why it was a change management problem. What was really clear as we started working on the program aspect is nobody understood the end-to-end system, which led us to not really understanding what was coming to the organization. So then I did a headwind sensing on the organization using that disruption model that I was talking about, and we completely changed the strategy. The thing that became most obvious, and this was a couple of years ago, the thing that became most obvious is that AI was hitting more than one of their disruption vectors, and the likelihood of them being in business 2 years out if they didn't tackle AI was almost none. So the ED immediately shifted gears, went after AI and got some big AI contracts so that they were well ahead of the game before we started. So I came in to fix change management, ended up completely revising their strategy and building them a way to look at what was coming at them.
Okay. Are you seeing the strongest demand from startups, mid-market organizations, or large enterprises?
Typically, because of what I'm offering and because of what's out there, typically I am mid-market to kind of growing SMBs. And the reason for that is there is a capability out there called the Enterprise Operating System, EOS. And if you're a small organization and you're just disorganized and you don't know how to do strategy, it is super easy to deploy. It's just templated, you fill it out, you kind of get structured, and then you can do what you need to do strategically. Usually people bring me in when their organization starts to get complex enough that not everybody is talking to everybody, and they need some way, some very simple, light way to be able to keep people tied together as they're going through the paces. And that's where I really shine. So 50, an organization of 50 people or above, say to about 1,000, is where my sweet spot is.
How has AI changed the nature of conversations you're having with clients compared to just a few years ago?
Well, it's the first question that comes up, right? Is what about AI and what do I do with it? So somebody like me, who 4 years ago knew nothing about AI except the concept of it, now has to be relatively an expert in application, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm finding is where I would focus my time in 4 years ago is on all the business aspect, creating models, da da da. I'm also having to speak the language of AI and how it impacts any one part of it. And as much as anything, I'm saying, don't put it there, that you're not going to be happy with the results. We might have some value in putting it here instead. So that's how it's changed. It's in every conversation, and I have to be competent in order to be even just do my regular job, which is, refining organizations to optimize against disruption.
And as organizations scale, what tends to break first? Communication, leadership, alignment, process, technology?
They all have their problems. I would say if I were going to point to one, it's maintaining alignment for lots of reasons. First, it's hard to communicate alignment in a large organization if you don't have a simple process to do it or willing ears to hear it. Where I usually start, and when I'm working with, if I come in and an organization says, "Tell us what to do first," I always start with culture. And the reason I start with culture is because unless you have your culture sorted out, and I don't mean aspirational, we want to kind of be like this. I mean, the culture is built into the governance processes. If you don't have the culture sorted out, then fixing all the rest of the things is a very painful process. You're pushing a boulder up a hill against a lot of friction. So if you fix the culture, you'll get a lot of help in getting the stuff sorted out.
How large are the leadership teams that you typically work with during transformation initiatives?
Whew. So typical for mid-market companies is I'm probably closely working with 5 to 10 leaders within organizations, and then there'll be other folks, experts, et cetera, that will engage in the process. I have worked in organizations large enough to have the effort that I was participating in at Sun, that I was one of the leaders in the transformation effort. We had 3 senior VP leaders tied to the program, technical, business, et cetera, et cetera. We had probably 20 directors tied to the effort, and then 400 people working on the effort to change it. So that was the largest one. I would never recommend doing anything like that again. It was just too painful, too likely to break, and too costly.
Okay, let's transition here to our rapid fire round. So before we wrap up, we'll do our rapid fire round. It's just going to be one word or one sentence kind of answer the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Most underrated leadership skill.
Communication. And I have lots to say about that, but communicating effectively.
The biggest misconception about AI.
Uh, that it's a magical solve. It can provide very specific solutions, but it's not a magical solve.
The AI tool do you use most often?
I toggle between several. I would say Claude is my most effective use of AI time right now.
One technology besides AI that you're watching closely?
So blockchain, and the reason is the applications and potential applications in supply chain.
Yeah, I think those two actually pair up very well because blockchain really provides kind of this whole layer of both digital identity and transaction verification. And then AI and the agents is really kind of the brains, and the two have to work together. So those
Uh,
are very key. Yeah.
you said it better than I've ever heard anybody else say it. That I think you're exactly right.
All right. Startup or enterprise?
Startup. It's
Remote.
constrained.
Oh, go ahead.
It's constrained, so you have to make really carefully thought of and imaginative decisions.
Yes, that's the truth. Remote, hybrid, or in person?
Hybrid. There's benefits to both. I think in their application, use both.
One business trend that leaders should be paying more attention to.
Um, the work that I'm doing, disruption and the speed of disruption.
One prediction for the future of work.
All all um, all folks operating within organizations will have to become more technically oriented.
And one prediction for AI in 2030.
2030, I think it will be a dependable tool by 2030. I think we'll go through a real maturation process in the next couple of years that will make it much more useful.
Okay, great answers. Let's finish with a few final thoughts for our audience. So if listeners remember only one thing from our conversation today about AI and organizational transformation, what would you want it to be?
Keep it simple.
What's one action that business leaders can take in the next 30 days to become more AI ready?
If they haven't yet, they should spend time on any large language model and see what kind of responses they get to the kinds of questions they ask. You'll learn how to much better manage it if you know what it's going to give you.
Before we wrap up, where can listeners learn more about Operations Architect, connect with you, and follow your work? Please share websites, social media channels, and any resources you'd like our audience to check out.
The best place and the most central place to get hold of me is at operations-architect.com. You can get hold of me. You can set up time with me. You can see what I offer at operations-architect.com.
Okay. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And thank you to everyone tuning in to another episode of the AIScento Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share the episode with someone who's exploring how AI is transforming business and leadership. For more AI insights, transformation strategies, and future-focused conversations, visit us at AIScento.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep building the future.